What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, March 7th, 2019. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got lots to talk about today here, and the phone lines are open. 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, opinions, points of view, whatever you might want to talk about here. So let's get on into it, and we're going to start, as we often do, with the war zones. Emphasis on the plural here. A couple of days ago, Al-Qaeda launched a strike at the Syrian Arab Army, and yesterday the Syrian Arab Army delivered a massive rocket strike on the positions of the Turkestan Islamic Party in Jisr al-Shugur in the northwestern part of Idlib province. This is the first strike in this area for like 5 months. And the strike was in response to the recent increase in shelling of government-held areas in northwestern Hama, which has been causing civilian casualties on a regular basis. Separately, the Syrian Arab Army carried out a rocket strike on the headquarters of Jaish al-Izza near the town of Khan Sakun in southern Idlib. And the headquarters were totally destroyed. 7 militants, including the group's field commander Majid al-Said, were eliminated, which is a polite word for they got blown to bits. Now, Jaish al-Izza is one of the key allies of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. They keep changing their names over there as often as they change their underwear. And despite this, corporate media outlets describe it as a moderate opposition group. And at various different times during the year, Jaish al-Izza was receiving support from the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. So everybody's still mucking about. Now, interestingly enough, despite talk about pulling out of Syria that we heard from Donald Trump not too long ago, apparently the Pentagon is shifting weapons from Iraq to Syria. And apparently they rerouted millions of dollars worth of weapons and vehicles from Iraq to Syria in the second half of last year. U.S.-backed forces cornered the last remnants of the Islamic State. And in a series of notifications to Congress reviewed by Al Monitor, the Defense Department said it had determined that a bevy of supplies purchased by the Pentagon for the Iraq military would instead go to the Kurdish-dominated Syrian Democratic Forces. So the stock of equipment includes nearly 50 Humvees, 20 mine-resistant vehicles, 40 enhanced armament carriers, and nearly 700 light anti-tank weapons. The Pentagon also approved the transfer of more than 2,400 mortar rounds, 25 mine rollers, and dozens of charges used to destroy mines and other explosives. So, yeah, it doesn't look like we're getting ready to get out of Syria anytime soon. Now, yesterday we reported on the fact that in Venezuela, the German ambassador was declared persona non grata, supposedly for attempting to interfere in Venezuela's internal affairs, was given 48 hours to leave the country. Now, Juan Guaido, the self-declared interim president of Venezuela, is basically saying this is basically a threat by Maduro to Germany, and basically saying, you know, this is because Germany threw their weight behind Guaido. And Guaido said in an interview with Der Spiegel, Venezuela lives under a dictatorship, and this action represents a threat against Germany, adding that he'd ask the ambassador to stay in the country. Now, that's going to put the ambassador in a very interesting position. It's going to put Maduro in a very interesting position. And again, this is just another scripted U.S. regime change operation. Not going all that well, however. You know, you've got the U.S. and the usual gang of suspects saying, oh, yes, this leader must go so we can send our corporations in there to bleed the place dry and, you know, and enrich ourselves here. But the world has kind of picked up on this. Previously, I mean, you know, back toward the 50s and 60s, when the U.S. was doing this to other countries, the American people didn't realize what was going on. Today, it is very different. And that is in large part due to the independent media like Republic Broadcasting, that you're finding out what's really going on out there or what really happened. Plug, 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 plug. Cheap plug. The repercussions are still bouncing back and forth over the hoaxing of Elliot Abrams by these two Russian pranksters, Vovan and Lexus. And these guys are famous. They're known for trolling the politicians. And they got Abrams on the phone for over 23 minutes in mid-February and early March, supposedly to talk about Swiss policy towards the situation in Venezuela, during which Elliot Abrams said that unless Venezuela did something really radical, like attacking the U.S. embassy, that there was, in fact, no plan for a direct military intervention of Venezuela. And that was definitely something that they didn't want to get on out because, as Elliot Abrams said, the Venezuelan military are nervous about a U.S. invasion, and we want them to be nervous. So at least as far as he shared with these pranksters, it's a bluff, although there are a lot of U.S. forces in Colombia who could be sent across that border. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in the Congress, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is threatening to kick Bernie Sanders out of the Democratic Party over his refusal to declare that Venezuela's President Maduro is a dictator. And again, Maduro won his election last year. He's voted in by the people in an election that had international observers who said it was fair, honest, and verifiable. But that's the official talking point. Maduro's a dictator. He's a tyrant. He passes wind in the elevators. He files his teeth because he thinks pain is fun. You should hate him and send your children off to kill him for us. Turkey is getting together with Iran for a joint raid against the PKK. And basically, it's because the PKK has resisted Ankara for 3.5 decades. They want their independence. They want an independent Kurdistan. For a while, they had U.S. backing. That's now gone away. But apparently, Turkey and Iran are now going to get together. They're not saying exactly which PKK positions are going to be targeted or when the attack would take place. But apparently, part of the plan was they'll attack militant hideouts inside Iraq. So everybody's fighting everybody over there. Yesterday, we reported on how the United States flew a pair of nuclear-capable B-52 bombers in international airspace, but right close to the border of the Chinese mainland. It's just another way of sticking a finger in their eye. And apparently, a top Philippine general is out there sounding the alarm, saying, you know, you could actually start a war by doing this. If you keep on provoking China, you could trigger a war. And he's absolutely correct here. It's all about goading. And again, I question the wisdom of these provocations against China at a time when we're trying to get them to sit down at the, trade talks, which apparently are not going very well. Imagine my surprise. Over in Israel, Israeli forces have fired once again at Palestinian protesters during a nighttime protest in the Gaza Strip. They killed a teenage boy on the same night when Israel's warplanes launched fresh airstrikes on Gaza, supposedly targeting Hamas. The 15-year-old boy, identified as Saif al-Din Abu Zaid, was shot dead by the Israeli forces during a protest rally held in eastern Gaza on Wednesday night. And Health Ministry spokesman Ashraf al-Qudra told AFP that the boy died due to the wounds he sustained a few hours ago. Several of the Palestinian youngsters were also injured by live fire. And the shooting came as Israeli warplanes launched fresh air raids on the southern Gaza Strip town of Khan Yunis. Now, 2 Palestinian children have burned to death in their home in occupied Hebron because the Israeli authorities blocked the fire brigade from reaching them in time. And the 2 children, one of whom is believed to have been just 18 months old, burned to death in the fire at their home in the Salema neighborhood of Hebron's old city in the occupied West Bank. One was reported dead late last night, while the second succumbed to the burns received this morning after receiving emergency treatment at the nearby Hebron Government Hospital. A third child, thought to be the dead children's brother, also suffered severe burns in the incident, remaining in intensive care. Now, one of the things that you may want to look at, it's on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. It is the video that was shown to the United Nations to sort of illustrate the UN report on Israel's atrocities against the Palestinian people. And it's simply a compilation of protesters being shot dead, protesters who are not engaged in any violence. They don't present a threat to Israel's forces, and that's the whole point of the argument. When you're just out there shooting protesters who are not a threat to you, that is a war crime. And that UN report, needless to say, is not getting a lot of coverage in the corporate media, other than the usual denunciations that it's anti-Semitic and it's Jew hate, and that nobody would complain about Israel if it weren't for the fact that they hate the Jews, which is like saying nobody would have complained about the Nazis if they didn't hate the Germans here. But there is quite a few people coming on out and saying that Gaza needs more than statements from the United Nations to stop Israeli violence. And they're absolutely right, because Israel has a long track record of simply ignoring resolutions by the General Assembly, which are not actually legally binding. And of course, the Security Council can do nothing as long as the United States is there. So you've got this High Commissioner for Human Rights, and basically their report found Israel had breached the human rights of Gazans in its response to protests there. And we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the Great March of Return. So people are saying it's time for something to be done about Israel. Now, Tel Aviv blasted the UN Commission's findings, with Netanyahu saying the council is setting new records for hypocrisy and mendacity out of an obsessive hatred of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East. Harumph, 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 harumph. Did I mention anti-Semitism? Now, here's a little bit of good news. And this is probably going to send a lot of shockwaves through the political establishment, certainly through Israel's support. And it has to do with this teacher in Wichita, Kansas, and her name is Esther Kuntz. And a couple of years ago, she saw a presentation at her church about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, and it struck her as unjust, as it does pretty much everybody. Last year, her church passed a resolution urging their parishioners to actively remedy injustice against both Palestinians and Israelis, in part by telling them to avoid the purchase of products associated with acts of violence or policies of military occupation, including the items produced in the settlement. And so this teacher said, yes, she was going to participate in the boycott. Well, around the same time, she decided to complete a Kansas State Department of Education training program that would qualify her to make some extra money by leading professional development sessions for the state's math and science teachers. And after she completed the training, she was scheduled for her first gig. But before she was started, she was contacted by Melissa Fast, the state employee who leads the program, who said that she had to sign this certification verifying that she was not boycotting Israel. And Kuntz explained that she was boycotting Israel. That was a matter of her First Amendment right to freedom of speech. It was something sanctioned by her church. And she went to court. And this week, in Kuntz versus Watson, a federal appeals court issued a ruling that says, yes, these laws saying that you have to sign a pledge not to boycott Israel is unconstitutional. It's a resounding victory. The court flatly declared the First Amendment protects the right to participate in a boycott, and basically chastised the Kansas legislators for passing the law in the first place, and the Kansas educational system for penalizing the teacher for refusing to sign the certification. So that is a tremendous legal victory, and I'm sure it's going to be cited as a precedent as more and more of these cases go to court. Because it is an attack on our First Amendment. And I don't know about you, I am angry, I'm furious at our elected representatives, who are supposed to be our representatives, not Israel, who are willing to gut the foundations of our nation, the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, to please a foreign master. We should be furious about that. We should be absolutely furious about that. Over in Jordan, in the Jordan Valley specifically, Israel has now cut the water supply to 2,600 Palestinians living in communities in Bardala village in the Jordan Valley, the northern occupied West Bank. And basically, Israeli forces cut off water for 60% of the residents of the Bardala village. And the Israeli forces also cut off water supplies for 1,800 to 2,000 dunams, that's about 500 acres, of Palestinian agricultural lands that must be continuously irrigated. And Mutaz Bisharat, who's an official who monitors settlement activity, added that Israel claims the water sources in the area are illegal, and saying, how can they be illegal? Because the water comes from wells inside the village and inside Palestinian lands. This is just another move by Israel to try and drive the Palestinians out so they can take more. Now, as you know, there was a recent tiff between Israel and Poland where Israel basically accused Poland of siding with the Nazis and participating in the Holocaust, and Poland said, no, what you're saying was all done by the Germans and we didn't help them. Well, the situation has now reached a point where there is a World War II era site where Jews were burned alive by Poles. And the Polish government is planning to, first of all, exhume the remains and excavate the site to document the fact that it was the Germans who ordered the Polish villagers to do the killings. And all of a sudden, all the Jewish people in Poland are saying, no, 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 don't dig it up, don't touch it, don't look, don't peek. You know, just take our word for it. You know, you Poles helped the Nazis. And all of a sudden, they're in a little bit of a panic that somebody might actually do some archaeology on the scene. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'd first like to say it was nice hearing from Layla yesterday. She really knows her stuff when it comes to Middle Eastern issues.
Yes.
But what I wanted to talk about was I was really disappointed with the meeting Trump had yesterday with all the Apple and the Chamber of Commerce type big business Republicans and corporate executives. I mean, my version of Trump's attraction is populism. And if he goes to this, and what I'm seeing now is he's criticizing socialists and socialism. And I hope he doesn't become the champion of oligarchical capitalism, because that's not why we elected him. And it scares me because although I don't like the socialist left, I understand the populism of the socialist left. And if Trump walks away from the populism on the right, that's what we're going to get. And I'd rather see populism from the right than populism from the left. But we're going to get populism because the rich, really, and the elite and the oligarchs, the Federal Reserve, all that, they've really destroyed the middle class in this country. And which way do you want the middle class to go, Mr. Trump? Do you want to go to the socialist middle class populism or right populism?
Okay, well, Joe, stay on the line. We got to take a break here for some commercials, and I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Here we're talking with Joe in Tennessee, and we're talking about the destruction of the middle class. And that is intentional because throughout history, it is from the middle class that opposition to oligarchy rises. And because of that, the middle class gets driven down into the lower classes. And one of the reasons for the Soviet Union, the way they set up that system, it was designed to prevent there being a middle class at all, where everybody was equally poor and therefore equally helpless in the face of the Soviet government. And so in answer to your question, ultimately they're going to want the middle class to dissolve, down to the lower classes.
This country, they don't have gun control in place yet, but they are using like the opioid epidemic and stuff to destroy what used to be middle-class white people, which is very sad to witness.
Well, they're also crushing, wages and salaries are being crushed down, costs and taxes are going up. We're being squeezed, is what it is.
Absolutely. But, I mean, Trump ran as sort of the blue-collar billionaire, and I've noticed for a while there he'd always have a lot of hard hats around in the Oval Office, but I haven't seen any hard hats for a while. And that meeting yesterday really set off alarm bells because they're just basically, Tim Cook of Apple and, all these same people that are just outsourcing all our jobs and, they want more cheap labor to come in from India. And it was just horrifying and just a big slap in your face. I really am a big populist, and I'm a believer. I believed in it. So far, I thought Trump was doing all right, but I don't know. That was very alarming. But the thing is if he does go this way, he's gonna lose because there is going to be a choice because it's going to be populism left or populism right, and I'm hoping it's the right populism because it's usually more about individual freedom when it comes on the right side, and on the left side, it's also more, America first and nativist, which I don't find a bad thing. But the left will be international globalist populism, more along the line of, of course, socialism, and less individual rights, and that's my major grief, and worry.
Yes,
and so Trump doesn't perform the swing to the left, and I think that's why the Democrats are being more lefty than probably politically expedient, is because they think Trump's going to lose, and then they can get their wish list of all the real hardcore lefty stuff that they've been wanting for a long time. There'll be a rebound. The pendulum, it's going to go pretty far left if he doesn't keep it together. And,
we were counting on Trump to sort of bring the pendulum back to the right, and it's not happening. That pendulum is still just sort of hovering over there on the left-hand side, and I'm not seeing as much of a correction as I was kind of hoping to see by this stage in Trump's administration. This country still pretty much, left-wing agenda is in place.
Yeah, no, it's it looks like everything's stalled out, and whether it's the swamp that got him or he was fake from the start, I can't say I'm losing faith, but my ears are up. It's kind of it's getting hard to defend him, and that's the truth.
Yeah, it is. And, he's a disappointment, and I'm not defending him anymore, and I think he's going to be a one-term president.
Well, like my brother says, if he doesn't get us into a war, and he does bring people home from wars, then that would be a great thing. Anyway, without take all the other baloney away, that is probably so far he's kind of not accelerated any of these issues.
Look what he's doing in Venezuela. And he said he was going to get us out of Syria. That's not happening. He said he was going to get us out of Afghanistan. Well, maybe, but it's going to take years to do. The campaign promise that Americans really most wanted him to keep was to get us out of all these foreign entanglements.
Well, I totally agree with you. So we'll see. I mean, I haven't given up on him yet, but he's really starting to disappoint me. It's almost like it's one after another. So But
I don't think he's in charge. I think he's a weak leader. I mean, we had that story we ran yesterday where John Bolton is basically arm twisting the president of the United States, you know, and he's basically running U.S. foreign policy. And nobody elected Bolton to run U.S. foreign policy. Basically, as I understand it, Trump put Bolton in that job to repay Sheldon Adelson for Sheldon Adelson's financial support during the 2016 campaign. So I guess it's Sheldon Adelson who thinks all these wars are great. I don't know. He may have a lot of his money invested in defense contractors, you know, because that's a fast buck. You know, buy stock in the weapons companies and then start a war. You make a lot of money real quick. Anyway, listen, Joe, got to let you go. We got to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Very timely bump music here. We're talking about Israel and Palestine. Yesterday, we reported on a story where some Palestinians were literally thrown out of their home so that some settlers could move on in. And the settlers were claiming it was actually their property and their home. And the Israeli government sided with the settlers, to be, you know, no surprise here. And according to this article in MiddleEastEye.net, this apparently is now a new thing the settlers are doing, where they're literally coming in to Palestinian homes in the settlements or near the settlements, and they're throwing them out, and they're doing it with forged documents and other mechanisms here, including just outright force. Go on in and say, this is now our house. And so it is continuing here. Now, the argument is still building around the Bab al-Rama. This is a gate at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel closed it in 2003. It was a 16-year closure. It expired last August. But Israel wants to close the gate once again to, quote, keep out protesters as part of its war against terror. Now, in reality, the Muslim holy site is used by Palestinians to pray. And so there is a big argument building over that. And the Islamic Waqf, the body responsible for Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem, they're basically trying to stand up to the government of Israel and say, no, these people are peaceful, and why aren't you keeping the settlers out of the Al-Aqsa Mosque? Because they're coming on in and causing a ruckus, usually escorted by Israeli military. And I think there was another article we talked about over the last couple of days where Israel is now saying they want to Judaize the place. And they've been wanting the Muslim holy sites to go away for a very long time. If they were to tear down like Al-Aqsa or the Dome of the Rock, I mean, that would just set the entire Mideast aflame right now. Okay, as you know, Trump pulled us out of the P5+1 nuclear deal. The other signatories are not happy with it. They're still going along with the terms of the deal. Iran is still honoring the terms of the deal. It's the U.S. that basically broke the deal and promptly hit Iran with all kinds of new sanctions to get them to come back and modify the deal to include their long-range rockets, which Iran is saying they're not going to do. So the U.S. has sanctioned Iranian oil, and Iran is still trying to sell their oil to nations like China, which is refusing to honor the sanctions. And now Israel is saying that they may interdict Iranian oil tankers in international waters. Israel's position is that Iran selling oil to nations like China without U.S. permission constitutes smuggling, and that potential military attacks on oil tankers in international waters is enforcement of U.S. sanctions. It's not clear that anybody else would consider that to be the case, but that's where Netanyahu is going now, where Israel's Navy is literally going to fire on Iran's civilian oil tankers at sea. Or at least that's what he says they're going to do. Anyway, all of this talk of boycotts and calling attention to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, it is having an effect. Gallup just did a poll, and it's showing that overall American support for Israel has fallen to a 10-year low. Now, we all grew up, of course, just saturated in pro-Israel propaganda in the schools, on TV, in the movie theaters, and everything. But apparently, on this last poll, 59% of Americans say they side with Israel in its conflict with the Palestinians, but that is down from 64% just a year ago. That is a major, major drop. And I think it's very, very significant, and that's probably the reason why Israel is in a panic, and they're trying to get laws passed that say you can't boycott us, you can't criticize us, you can't say bad things about us. So they're hitting the panic button, is my read on the situation. Story out of Sputnik News. It's time for Congress to step up. U.S. lawmakers seek to end U.S. involvement in Yemen. And apparently there's a bipartisan effort in the U.S. Senate to pass a bill that would end Washington's support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. And Kevin Zeese, co-coordinator for Popular Resistance, says it would be fantastic to see such a bill pass, but beware of loopholes. Because there have been Yemen bills passed in the Senate, also in the House of Representatives, but never together. So maybe they'll get one to pass. But the Yemen war needs to end. It is a disaster. The U.S. should never have gotten involved, and Saudi Arabia needs to be held accountable for the crimes it's committing in Yemen every single day. I agree, as long as you understand that the U.S. involvement is a little bit more dark, if you will, than this gentleman seems to understand. Because several years ago, the United States carried out a successful regime change in Yemen, and the people of Yemen didn't like living under a government that was serving a foreign power any more than we do, or the Iraqis do, or the Syrians almost did. And so they basically kicked the U.S.-backed government out. And that infuriated the United States, because once you are a province of the American empire, you don't get to leave. And that's when the U.S. and Saudi Arabia got together and went in to just slap Yemen around and get them back in line. And what they're calling the rebels, the Houthis, they're actually the government of Yemen. And they try and hide that fact by saying, well, there's this internationally recognized government which has no more legitimacy than Juan Guaido down there in Venezuela. It's just, we say this is the government. Forget about the people of Yemen and what they want. Forget about the results of elections. We, the nations around the United States and its allies, we have decided that this is the legitimate government of this country, because they will allow our corporations to come on in and bleed the place dry. Mahi dictum est. Over in Russia, there's been more Russia bashing going on here, and the corporate media in Europe and politicians in Europe are sounding the alarm that Moscow is going to interfere in the European elections. And I guess all of those candidates who fear losing to Eurosceptic populist opponents are getting ready to blame Russia the way Hillary did in 2016, because that's the new political fashion. Anything goes wrong, it's Moscow's fault. Okay, our dishwasher broke down yesterday, had to be Putin. He snuck in there and he just cut that belt. That's the fashion here. And this article goes on, and it's out of the Express for what that's worth, saying Moscow is believed to have meddled in France's presidential election in 2017 and faced accusations of doing the same in the Brexit referendum. So now they're trying to blame Russia for Brexit. And note the language. They are believed to. They were accused of. Nobody actually has any evidence. And if you look at what happened with the Mueller investigation, you know, accusations and beliefs are cheap things. They're certainly fodder for the corporate media and the propaganda industry, but they're not facts. So Moscow is basically firing back and saying, look, we don't need to meddle in your elections. You know, you're in a mess of your own making, and we've got our own problems here. If you want to look at somebody who meddles in other people's elections, look at Israel here in the United States of America, or the U.S. government in other countries. Like, again, trying to undo last year's Venezuela election by forcing the winner of the presidency, Maduro, out and forcing Juan Guaido in. Yet more anti-Russian hysteria is now screaming that there are hundreds of mercenaries from Russia are now in Libya, and we haven't seen them, but there are rumors. There are rumors. And this is coming out of the British newspaper, The Telegraph, and they're screaming about the presence in Libya of mercenaries from Russia. And the newspaper just went totally wild on the basis of what they themselves admit are merely rumors. So what's getting ready to happen there? And basically, the Telegraph is arguing that Russia wants to prevent the West from controlling the flow of Libyan oil that goes to Europe. So once again, another war, and it's all about the oil, where it goes, who pays for it, what currency it's denominated in. Okay. All right. Over the Baltic Sea, there's been another close encounter of the dangerous kind. There was a Russian Sukhoi Su-27 fighter. It intercepted a U.S. RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft above the Baltic Sea, and the Russian military released a 17-second video showing the Su-27 fighter coming from behind to intercept the spy plane. And they say, yes, it was over international waters of the Baltic Sea near the Russian border. So there's playing games up there until somebody makes a mistake. Over in Kashmir, tensions are very high between India and Pakistan. There has been artillery exchanged across the line of control. There was that incident where an Indian submarine was caught entering Pakistan waters, and people are very concerned that there may be a fourth war that will break out between the two countries. And basically, this has been a problem. Over 70 years ago, British colonizers turned Kashmir into this powder keg that have created decades of turmoil, hostility, and conflicts between India and Pakistan. What Kashmir ought to be allowed to do is to have a referendum. Do we want to be part of India? Do we want to be part of Pakistan? Do we want to be our own independent nation? And India is apparently dead set against there being a referendum, out of concern that it would not go in their favor. Over in France, the Yellow Vest protests are continuing, contrary to that declaration that following the anti-Semitism, the Yellow Vests they're finished, they're done now because of that anti-Semitic attack, which likely was a false flag. And unfortunately, it's now starting to get violent. And they're now describing the protests as being anti-police rather than anti-Macron, anti-EU, anti-immigration. And again, I think the violence is being done by agent provocateurs. But apparently these, again, my suspicion, agent provocateurs set fire to cars and hurled Molotov cocktails from the rooftops in the French city of Grenoble. And this is the fourth consecutive night of unrest, sparked by the death of two teenagers in a police chase. And apparently the Yellow Vests are attacking the police with poo bombs, where they will fill balloons with feces and just throw them. And I imagine that's not very comfortable for the police. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I was going back a couple weeks. There's this guy called Dr. Parag Khanna. He's like from India. And he said he has a book out. It's called The Asian World Order is Coming. And he talked about the Belt and the Road. And then you see what Trump's doing, like with China, with the tariffs, and then now India. Because I saw Erdogan's speech. Did you hear what he says? I'm not going to cancel my order for the S-400. And just to let you know, we're looking into getting the S-500. So there is a definite pivot going on here.
Oh, no question about it. Everything that the U.S. government is doing is actually driving the rest of the world away from us. We're seeing countries that are just saying, yeah, we're going to do business with China and Russia. They're more trustworthy. They're more stable. Other countries looking at the United States, they can see the chaos. They can see all the chaos that's going on, on the floor of Congress and in our city streets. They're looking at all the transgender brouhaha and thinking we've all gone collectively insane.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like, Nadler, they're just regurgitating, like, stuff that's already passed because it's all BS. But, Mike, like I said, there's no talk about no infrastructure rebuilding. There's no talk about anything. It's just a rotting corpse. I'm sad to say the country is rotting away.
Yes.
And these people are playing political games, and I don't see anything, like, to change that. Because I don't know. Do you see what Trump? He said that we're going to remember. We're going to pull the troops out of Syria, and then we're not. We're going to again. Now he's not again. He signed something that says we're not going. I mean, I don't know, man. It's just screwy. I mean, it just looks like it's a third world. It's worse than a third world banana republic. These people just have no clue, and they're all infighting. And I don't think it's going to end very, very well.
No, I don't. I still see the most likely outcome is a Soviet Union-style collapse of this country, and everybody needs to be getting ready to get through that transition. And hopefully there won't be a lot of violence. But the most important thing to do is to basically say those career politicians who wrecked the country are not to be allowed back into public life under any circumstances.
And I bet they have planes waiting just like Poroshenko has in Ukraine when he gets kicked out and one of the other two come in. They're going to be targeting Poroshenko. So he's going to have to make a real quick getaway.
Yeah, he's not going to win his next election. He's just so far behind in the polls there. And I imagine that probably a lot of these deep state people like the Clintons, they've already moved much of their hidden fortunes offshore, and they have plans. To do a bug out because it's a very, very unsettled situation here in this country.
And Mike, one quick thing before I get off. It wasn't just Brexit. Remember, they blamed Russia for the yellow vest too. They're blaming.
Whatever goes wrong. My laptop hard drive died. Had to be Russia. That's the fashion right now.
And then they'll blame the people, too, because they did that already, right? They blame the people, you're anti-Semite, or you're But, Mike, have a good rest of the show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open, and we're coming up on another commercial break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We've got another caller on the line, Sebastian in Sweden. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. I was just want to ask you about the Middle East. Every time I listen to your program, you always bring depressing news about all the Palestinians being killed, and it's really, it's really bad.
It is bad.
But I like the fact that I know, and this thing with boycotting Israel, I've been doing it since 1973. I never buy any products. My ex-wives, I talked them into doing it, and they still don't buy any Israeli products like SodaStream, fruits, and go at Starbucks because they support the illegal settlements. If anyone knows that, Starbucks, so you should go buy your coffee other places. And I went to school to learn Swedish with a Palestinian, and he turned out pretty good. He's got his own business, and we lost contact, but they're good people. I think it's a shame what Israel's doing, and the world is just standing by, just letting it happen, including Sweden. They don't say anything either. Mostly European countries, I think Israel has them in their little wing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the United States that's been subverted by Israel supporters. It's happening over a large part of the Western world.
Yeah, I know. It's a bad situation. Hopefully it will get better, but it doesn't look very good in the future. Put it that way.
No, it really doesn't. It seems like, and I'm sorry to be always reporting depressing news. I try and find good things to report on, like the achievements in space and everything, which we'll get to in the third hour. But the news out there is depressing, and I got to tell you, it gets really depressing doing the show.
Yeah, of course. I don't mean that. I mean not your program, but I mean just everything about the Middle East is like it's terrible. I mean, so it's a terrible situation that they're in now. It must be the largest, like you said once, the largest outside prison or prison camp in the world.
Yes.
Personally, I think they treat the Palestinians worse than the Nazis treated the Jews in the Second World War.
I think in many ways you're right. Certainly to go from the Red Cross reports. I mean, first of all, the Red Cross had permanent offices in all those slave labor camps, and the Germans actually took good care of the inmates because those inmates were making material supplies for the German army. And there were some camp commanders who actually got in trouble for not keeping their inmates healthy. But of course, most of us think of the Holocaust as what TV and movies have spun for us, and it's a complete fiction. It's just a total fiction for political gain. And as more and more people are saying, this doesn't really make any sense. Again, Israel has hit the panic button. They absolutely want to shut down discussion of anything involving Israel and Palestine right now. Anyway, listen, Sebastian, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. Got another caller on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We've got another caller on the line. Art Off the Grid, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, talking about how depressing it is. There was an old saying used to go, this is enough to just about drive a man to drink.
Yes.
Nowadays, we've had to update it. This is bad enough to damn near drive a man to lithium.
Well, I'm kind of old-fashioned. I still prefer the alcohol.
Yeah.
There are times when it's actually very hard to do this show, and I just keep saying, and the website as well,
I can imagine. But the previous caller there, I forget if that was Michael in New York, I think it was talking about Trump and how he's starting to look like a third world and whatever. But it got me thinking. I remember just like right there as we were coming up on the election, like election day and whatever, and even throughout election night, I was like, man, it looks like Trump just might do it, and Trump actually had me fooled. I will admit, man, I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and I'm not an easy man to sucker, because I can run the long con with the best of them. But what was my first indication that something might not be right, Mike? And that was almost immediately after Trump was declared the victor, and right before he hadn't even taken I think it was like before he had actually taken the oath of office or the inauguration, or it might have been right after it. But he made this statement, because one of his big things was, I'm going to instruct my director of justice, whoever it was, to begin an investigation into Clinton and this and that and the other and blah, 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 blah. And almost immediately after he won the election, he was like,
all gone.
The Clintons really have suffered enough, I think, so we're going to... And I looked at my buddy and I said, dude, if that doesn't sound like a politician, I don't know what does. And over the past couple of years, as I have watched Trump, he looks and sounds more like a politician than most politicians. And so it's got to the point, I don't believe a damn word comes out of this man's mouth. And I cannot for the life of me understand why certain individuals on RBN, not to call out any names, but are still on the Trump cheerleader bandwagon. It's like, my God, people, what is it going to take?
Well, a lot of people get caught up. They sort of personalize their candidates and their political party, and their candidates become part of their identity, and their egos get wrapped up in it. And unlike yourself, they don't want to admit that they were fooled. They don't want to admit that they may have been wrong in supporting Trump, and they'll go down in flames with him because, at this point, he's a one-term president. Unless he does something miraculous in the next 2 years, he's a one-term president here. And I get a lot of people emailing me saying, why aren't you still supporting Trump, or why aren't you supporting this or that person here? I'm here to support the process, okay? And I don't invest heavily in individuals or personalities. I'm just concerned about getting this country back on its constitutional track, which is getting harder and harder, and I'm getting too old to be a Gandhi dancer anyway. So, that's what I'm here for. I'm looking out for the process. And if, as much as I'm disappointed in Trump, some of these attacks and investigations against him are a violation of the process. They are. Yeah, it's an abuse of the process. And so, I'm going to be going after that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't like the man, but I'm not gonna sling a man up by his toes just because I don't like him. I'm like you. I'm gonna support what's right, what's just, and I don't give a damn whose face it wears. But I want to leave everybody with one more thought here, and this goes back to the comment about this country becoming a third world whatever.
Yes.
Here is what Pravda had to say, and this was back. Oh, God, this was like in the mid-1990s, I believe. And if this does not actually describe where we are today, I don't know what does. Here's what Pravda had to say. It can be safely said that the last time a great nation destroyed itself through its own hubris and economic folly was the early Soviet Union. Though in the end, the late Soviet Union still died by economic hand. Now we get the opportunity to watch the Americans do the same thing to themselves. The most amazing thing, of course, is that they are just repeating the failed mistakes of the past.
Yes.
And who was it, Mike, that said those who failed to learn the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat them? Thanks, and have a great one, bro.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And I want to take a moment to step back to Venezuela, because this story just got sent to me, and this is coming from a Venezuelan, actually it's from an Argentinian newspaper, and it's basically talking about how Pence and Guido, during their summit in Bogota, apparently did not go all that smoothly, because to basically put it in a nutshell, this article from Argentina reveals Guido tried to convince Vice President Mike Pence that half the military would join him, and Pence believed him. And as of right now, 0.1% of the Venezuelan army has joined Guido, and Pence is understandably very, very angry, because if Maduro still has 99% of the military loyal to him, then this attempted coup is dead on arrival, short of a decapitation strike or an assassination. And remember, it wasn't all that long ago somebody tried to take out Maduro with these drones wired with explosives. Earlier in the week, we had reported on these incendiary packages that arrived at 3 places in London, and apparently another one has been delivered to the University of Glasgow, and police are saying they're all from the same source. So I'm wondering if this is the beginning of some kind of a false flag campaign to whip up public sentiment either for or against some new policy here. Over in North Korea, apparently they're upset because, as the second summit has obviously failed, South Korea and the United States are now restarting their joint military exercises. And North Korea is nervous about that. And again, satellite images reportedly are showing that North Korea is rebuilding the launch platform that they had taken down following the first summit. And the corporate media is saying, oh, they're going to threaten the world, they're going to do that. But you need to understand, prior to its being dismantled, yes, they tested missiles from the launch platform. They also launched satellites. But the situation, they were so close. They were so close. All Trump had to do was match North Korea. Here's a nuke. Here, we're taking this one sanction down. Here's another nuke. Here, we're taking this one sanction down. Here's another nuke. We're taking another sanction down. That's how close they were. That's what Kim Jong-un wanted. And instead, Trump went with this arrogant, imperialistic attitude. You give us what we want first, and then maybe we'll do something nice for you. And he screwed the pooch, basically, on that deal. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has dusted off a Cold War-era concept to deal with large attacking forces, mainly Russia and China, and with all the technologies are in place, it's still going to take 10 years to get this thing online. But DARPA is resurrecting what was called Assault Breaker, and this is reported in Aviation Week. And this concept was once intended to prevent hordes of Soviet tanks from steamrolling NATO forces in Western Europe, and it's now being refurbished to fight China and Russia again, or at least to dissuade them from launching surprise attacks on the U.S. and its allies. I'm not sure why they really need this in this era of surveillance satellites. You know, unless they dig underground and build huge tunnels, surprise attacks are kind of a thing of the past. But the original Assault Breaker project was from the late 1970s, and it focused on creating precision-guided munitions and submunitions which could identify and destroy the armored targets of the Soviets. Well, they already have that. There's, I think it's called the JSOW, the Joint Standoff Weapon, and it's a cluster weapon, and the submunition basically can scan for heat signatures. So you uncork one of these things over a cluster of military vehicles, and these submunitions are going to target the engine compartments, which are usually very lightly armored because they're not used to being attacked from above. And they'll just slam in and shut that down. So again, this gets back to that article we were talking about yesterday about the military's habit of preparing for the last war. All right, it has been 10 years since former President Obama issued an executive order to close the prison facility in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. It is still open. And apparently, not only is President Trump determined to keep the camp open, his administration is now expanding it, and there is new construction taking place at Guantanamo. Trump has also canceled mandatory reporting of deaths by U.S. assassination drones. This was something that came out of the Obama era, where the military was required to basically make public the deaths caused by U.S. assassination drones. And Trump has signed an executive order, did it yesterday, so that assassinations carried out on the so-called war on terror are kept from you, the public, who, after all, is paying for it all. And one reason probably is because they're never really sure they're getting a terrorist. They don't have any evidence against these people. They just fly around and look for somebody who might be a potential terrorist. And I remember this one horrible story where one of the thresholds for targeting an individual is that they be tall, because it's presumed that tall, strong people are recruited by the terrorist organization. So this drone was flying over this town, and they saw this crowd walking across the street, and there was one figure in the middle of it who was clearly much taller than the others. And so the drone hit it. And it turned out to have been a school teacher escorting his class across the street. Bunch of kids. But they don't know, they don't know for certain that these people that are being targeted are actually terrorists or any kind of a threat to the United States. It's a campaign of terror waged from the skies. And if you think about it in that context, it's no different than what Germany was trying to do to Great Britain with the V-1 buzz bomb and the V-2 ballistic missile. They weren't particularly accurate, you know, and it was amazing for the technology of its time that they got anywhere near their intended targets. But it was just a reign of terror from the skies to pressure the British people, to pressure the British government to accede to Germany's demands, which, by the way, it did not work. And that tells us that the drone campaign will likely not work either. It'll have the opposite result. It will anger the people into harder resistance. That's what happened to the British. All right, let's turn to the domestic politics. And for some reason, this fury over Representative Ilhan Omar is still dominating the news and dominating the business of the United States Congress, like they don't have more important things to be looking at. And apparently, there's a bit of a public backlash from people who feel a lot like me. Can't get over it. You know, she has a First Amendment right to criticize Israel, and that's all she did. And so the Democrats are now trying to calm things down. They were supposed to be having the vote on this anti-hate bill, and last I heard, it's been delayed yet again. But looking at just the fury that's going on, you've got Rahm Emanuel over in Chicago basically equating Ilhan Omar to those who carried out the Holocaust. I mean, they're always going to drag out the Holocaust card when they want to go after somebody. Freshman Representative Jahana Hayes of Connecticut confronted Pelosi directly after Pelosi was accused of failing to adequately respond to the escalating political crisis, saying that there was too little outreach to their own rank and file. So Hayes basically saying that she shouldn't have to learn about the official Democratic caucus response from MSNBC. And Hayes is saying she now has to vote on a resolution she's barely read without a private briefing from leadership. Well, she's going to have time to read it now because the vote has been delayed. But this intense fury only validates what Omar said, that everybody in the Congress is basically dancing to AIPAC's tune. AIPAC pulls the strings, and those members of Congress, they flap their jaws and they scream anti-Semite and Jew hate and Holocaust. And it's not just Congress. Trump apparently waded on in there saying that the Democrats should have taken a stronger stand against anti-Semitism, and saying that anti-Semitism has fueled atrocities throughout history and it's inconceivable they will not act against it. All right, well, let's take a look at that. Anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not supporting anti-Semitism, but I recognize it has been there throughout history. Where does it come from? Because you don't have a group of people that just wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to hate that other group of people over there. Usually a multi-generational hate is born out of the abuse of one group of people by another. And if you go back and you look at the actual detailed history of expulsions, persecutions, and pogroms against the Jewish people, you find only one common factor, and that's the Jewish people themselves and the way they refuse to integrate into their local environment. And so Israel likes to declare that certain stereotypes about Jews are just anti-Semitic, and I mean to the point where most schools will no longer perform Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. Oh, it's anti-Semitic to portray, Shylock as just, greedy and trying to make money. That was the world that Shakespeare knew. Now, I don't agree with hate. Sometimes, hate gets a bad reputation. I think there are certain hates that are perfectly acceptable. I hate liars. I hate cheats. I hate people who abuse little children, and I'm not going to apologize for that one tiny bit here. So apparently Pelosi has run into a little resistance. Apparently rank-and-file Democrats are revolting against Pelosi over this resolution to condemn anti-Semitism. And Pelosi apparently even walked out of a meeting with Democratic House members saying, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm done talking. Oh, how imperial can you get here? And the issue is, for a lot of these House Democrats and the House Republicans, legitimate criticism of Israel should be allowed. It should be protected by the First Amendment, because Israel's actions are the issue here. Anti-Semitism is just hating somebody for being a Semite, which includes the Arabs, I might point out. We're talking about behaviors here. We're talking about the policies of the government of Israel. And that First Amendment to our Constitution says we have a right. It's not given to us. It recognizes an already pre-existing right to criticize government, any government, especially one that gets so much money from us. And so already we have some corporate media coming on out and saying, well, legitimate criticism, that's just a phony excuse, to not move forward on this. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials here, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And once again, I have to put on my beggar's outfit. Actually, this is pretty much it, what I'm wearing right now. And Claire's laughing in the other room here. Republic Broadcasting needs your support. I'm sure if you're listening to this show, if you're listening to Republic Broadcasting at all, you understand what a situation the country is in right now. In fact, I'm looking at the lower third on the Fox feed. It says radical Dems are pushing for Trump's impeachment. And they don't really have anything. The Mueller report's not going to have anything. They're already launching new investigations. They're going to try and find something, anything where they can impeach him. And it's symbolic at best because the Senate will not remove. Okay? So anyway, if we're going to stay here, if Republic Broadcasting is going to stay on the air, if whatreallyhappened.com is going to stay online, we really do need your support. Nobody's getting rich doing independent media. The ones who are getting rich, you have to find out where is that money coming from and what strings come with it. So Republic relies on your support as well as the advertising revenue. That's about it. We have no big sponsors. We have no foundation money coming in. It's just you and us. And so it really is serious. Republic needs your help right now. So the postal address to send in a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can call in with a debit or credit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. All right, getting on back to this thing about the anti-hate resolution. Apparently Pelosi is now trying to reword it and rework it and make it a little bit more broad, saying that hate in general is wrong. And now they're adding anti-Muslim bias concerns to the anti-Semitism resolution, because as it's written right now, it's very clearly something that is being done on behalf of the nation of Israel. And we're at a time right now where more and more Americans are in fact becoming very concerned about exactly what Ilhan Omar said. There's an unhealthy degree of influence over the U.S. government by AIPAC and other pro-Israel organizations, collectively known as the Israel Lobby. And they play the game very well. They've got lots of money to work with. Sometimes they like to play dirty. And we've been invaded. Covertly, but we've been invaded. So there's this article over in the Middle East Monitor that's watching this old brouhaha, and it's saying, Congress criticizes Ilhan Omar's words, but they remain silent about Israel's violence. And yes, that is absolutely true. Now, all Ilhan Omar did was she criticized members of Congress who take money from pro-Israel political action committees in exchange for political support for Israel's policies. Well, that's not what they're there to do. That's not what we elected them to do. They're supposed to be in the halls of Congress, the bowels of power, taking care of this country, of figuring out the policies that are best for our economy, our infrastructure, the American people. Not just get up there and sell out, again, to a foreign power. That's what's going on. And she must have hit really close to home to see that fury just rise up around her. She's been pilloried. And this basically validates what she was saying. If she'd criticized members of Congress for taking money from, for example, Great Britain, do you think there would have been this fury? No. All right. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is still dealing with this dark money scandal, apparently she's coming under investigation, or she's been accused by this Washington, D.C. based ethics group. They're claiming that Cortez's social media usage violates House ethics rules against using taxpayer resources for political purposes. Now, Ocasio-Cortez's political Instagram account contains direct links to her House Instagram account and includes a link for political contributions, alongside posts of official video footage on the House floor. This is coming from the Foundation of Accountability and Civic Trust, and they're basically filing a complaint, today. So some of the luster is rubbing off Ocasio-Cortez, which is kind of weird, because over at the Political Insider, Democrat voters are out there saying, yes, she's the candidate of the future. All right, we're going to take a break for more commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about domestic politics here. And apparently Democrat voters, they're infatuated with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They're not really looking very carefully at her proposals like the Green New Deal. And apparently there was this group of Democratic voters. They were on CNN, and they were just singing Alexandria's praises. And apparently she's being called the future of politics. And Christian Tamte basically came on and said she's the candidate of the future. She's got this down pat. She's also nailed it as a woman in a male-dominated field. So they're already playing the feminist card. And this is how women in the male-dominated fields, we have to work like this all the time. Get ready for her because she's coming. Well, maybe not. Because there's another article where it says that, yes, she did win the midterm elections, but actually had very few votes. She was elected with almost 33% fewer votes than Crowley got in 2016. Now, that, of course, is explained by the difference between a presidential year election and a midterm, where voter turnout is down. And they're analyzing the numbers and saying that her support may be more vulnerable than anybody wants to talk about. And it appears that the Democratic vote in the stronghold is declining sharply. And if Alexandria keeps going on the way she's been going on with these nutty ideas, I imagine that there's going to be room for a new candidate come 2020. Okay, Michael Cohen has ended his fourth day of Capitol Hill questioning. Actually, he did that yesterday. And he handed over documents he claims show how Trump lawyers changed testimony, which resulted in his perjury conviction. And basically, when he came out from the closed door meeting, he announced that House Intelligence Committee members were satisfied with his answers. So now I understand that Cohen is trying to sue Donald Trump to recover his legal fees. Okay. And they're still out there flogging that dead horse called Russiagate. And a few weeks ago, Moon of Alabama reported Russiagate is finished, and it really ought to be. It's way past its sell-by date here. There was nothing found to support this conspiracy theory. The Trump campaign did not collude with Russia. And a few underlings were indicted for completely unrelated issues and for lying to the investigators about minor details. But nothing at all supports the dramatic claims of collusion made since Trump took office. Now, in a just world, all those corporate media prostitutes and correspondents who for more than 2 years pushed Russiagate and caused so much damage to so many people would be let go from their positions and apologize. That's not going to happen. They're going to jump onto the next conspiracy train and keep on going, and they will never, ever apologize for what they've been doing. And again, the Mueller report, we're hearing, it's going to be out the end of this month. Amazon is already accepting pre-orders for it. It's going to be a big nothing burger, is what we're hearing from insiders who've read the report, because they didn't find anything. It's going to be a book of rumor and innuendo. So the Democrats are already launching all these other investigations, and Trump is right. It's a witch hunt, or in this case, a warlock hunt. It's a fishing expedition. And as that lower third that was on Fox here just a little while ago, say, the radical Democrats, they're calling for his impeachment. They don't even have anything to go on. They're just saying, get rid of him, get rid of him. Our government is tearing itself apart. Anybody can see that. Pardon me. Now, here's a weird story. Aaron Schock, he's a former congressman, and apparently the reason he lost his last election, he was revealed to have used official funds to decorate his Capitol Hill office in the style of Downton Abbey. I guess he was a huge fan of the show. And he's made a deal that will allow him to escape federal prosecution. Prosecutors agreed to drop all charges if Schock, who was accused of misspending campaign and government money for his personal benefit, will admit to the wrongdoing, repay his back taxes, and reimburse his campaign committee nearly $68,000. Boy, that is a lot of redecorating here. As you know, getting on back to this fishing expedition, the Democrats are not just investigating Trump, they're going after his family. And the optics on that are not looking good. And the Democratic leadership is saying it could, in fact, backfire. And so what they're trying to do is get federal prosecutors to look at the family, and Congress would just stay back and distance themselves. And the reason to be going after the kids is if they get something where they could threaten to put Trump's kids in prison for a very long time, then they have a lever on him where they can say, go along with the impeachment, step down, claim it's health reasons or whatever, and the charges will be dropped. Talk about dirty politics here. Story coming out of Reason.com. Axios Harris did a poll on Americans' least favorite company, and overwhelmingly it came out that the least favorite company is the U.S. government. And apparently a lot of people were surprised the government even made it onto the list, since it's technically not a company. But last year, the U.S. government didn't make the most visible list. This year, it did. And it didn't matter what political party the respondents belonged to. Republicans ranked the government 95 out of 100. Democrats ranked it 98. Independents put it dead last. Okay. All right, we're going to start talking about the economic news now. And the latest beige book is now out, and that is basically a report on economic conditions. And one of the things they found is that semiconductor orders from China plunged the most since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Now, this is important because there are very few U.S. companies able to make memory chips, which was apparently the big area, DRAMs. So we may see some stocks take a hit from that report as well. Okay, Enbridge. Enbridge's Line 3 pipeline expansion delayed in the latest major blow to Canadian energy industry. So Enbridge is delaying the date when it expects its replacement Line 3 crude oil pipeline to be in expanded service. And according to Bloomberg, the project had previously been set to begin shipping crude in the fourth quarter of this year, and now they're pushing back construction due to slow permitting in Minnesota, or at least that's what they're claiming. Over in China, and this is more fallout from the Huawei situation, I guess. Canada's largest grain processor has announced that Beijing has canceled its registration to ship canola seed to China, and that it was fueled by the arrest of this top executive for Chinese tech giant Huawei. So it's just another ratcheting up of tensions between China and Canada here. Over in France, their seed maker, Vilmorin, is defying new U.S. sanctions on Iran to continue exports of seeds to Iran. And Iran is facing the toughest ever sanctions imposed by the U.S. in November, but Vilmorin said on Tuesday it is working with a banking partner to finance deals with Iranian clients able to pay in euros. So, like I said, all of this economic sanctions and tariffs are driving other countries away from the U.S. dollar. And without other countries using the U.S. dollar for a small interest fee, there isn't much left to prop our economy up here. But, Iran is basically the world's fifth largest vegetable grower, and they are apparently dependent on these seeds, which is kind of a surprise to me because I remember when I was in farming country, you collect seeds out of the remains of your garden after harvest. Just put them in a sack for the next season. Anyway, we're going to take a phone call. Zane in Washington, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I've been seeing these articles, and it happens every 2 or 3 days now where there's a scandal regarding Google or Facebook and the conduct of their multi-hundred billion-dollar companies. Mostly, the what bothers me the most is the use of microphones to, I guess, do some targeting work for advertisers in microphones and devices where they will, I usually tell the story where they're having a conversation at dinner and they talk about their eyesight or something, and then a couple hours later, just out of the blue, they get an ad for eyeglasses. Do you want to buy some new glasses? Well, I wanted to ask, what you thought of this. I am in the advertising business. I make videos, promotional videos, and it's for me to give my best advice for how to use them once I make them. And some of my advice has been about Facebook advertising, and of course Google owns YouTube, and that's an advertising platform. But I've since discontinued that kind of advice. I just can't do it. The way that they're targeting customers, and Facebook does it too, is they listen to their private conversations, and so when they see an ad like that, like I said, the example of the eyeglass merchant, it says that the eyeglass merchant wants their business. They want to sell them some glasses. But it also tells them that they're okay with this surveillance state of things, where this is a legitimate way of targeting you as a customer, and we're fine with it. You should be fine with it too. And it's creepy. So like I said, I'm not giving advice on YouTube promotions or Facebook anymore. I've switched to something called video brochures, where these brochures are slick printed pieces. You open up the brochure, and there's a small video player in there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're made. Of course, they're probably made in China. You know, we don't make anything anymore like that. It's probably some factory in Hong Kong, from what I've been able to see, or maybe a handful of factories. And China can make quality products if they want to.
Yes, they can.
And I think that there's some industry standards here that they're all adhering to. It's probably planned by the government the way to maintain certain standards, because their warranty on these video brochures, from what I've seen, is a 2-year warranty, and that doesn't mean that it's going to last 2 years and then fall off. It'll probably last for 4 or 5 years. It's a real investment. But, people have already gotten into Google advertising, and I've talked to some people that pay $500 or $600 a month to be listed, which is basically a phone book now. It's a modern day. Google operates a phone book that, instead of paying what used to be, in a phone book maybe $800 or $1,000 a year, it's now $500 or $600 a month. So they just don't have any they don't have any operating budget for advertising, and video brochures kind of a big cash outlay. And I know you're kind of in this business. You are in this business, so I was just wondering if you give me some sense of what you think of what is the death of advertising and the rebirth of advertising?
Well, the first thing that I
brochures.
would say, from the point of view of your advertising customers, is when they are paying to be on Google and Facebook, they know they are reaching X number of readers, whereas a single one of your little video brochures, which, by the way, sounds really neat, kind of cool, reminds me of brochures that used to come with CDs or DVDs in them. It's basically going to be seen by only a handful of people. And so the bang for the buck really isn't there. Google and Facebook, of course, are in trouble because of all the surveillance. And as far as the issue of the microphone, the reason that Google got into trouble over that one is customers were not being told that this particular device had a built-in microphone until they were notified that a future software patch would enable the microphone to work. And so people got very, very upset. They don't like to buy things and bring them home and then find out there's something in them that they didn't know about. People want to know exactly what they're bringing into their homes, especially with all of the spying that's going on here. Google and Facebook are also under fire. In fact, all the big social media companies, I think, have had problems with accurate numbers, and they have been caught inflating readership numbers to drive up their ad rates. There was one that actually had a Chinese clickbot factory just hitting their page over and over again to drive up their numbers. So basically it's giving everybody the idea that social media, corporate social media, has become incredibly crooked and incredibly corrupt. And with their new policies of censorship, they are starting to lose a lot of their readers. And in theory, their ad rates should be going down.
Yeah, well, they're an industry that doesn't have a rate card like, traditionally you would go to a print magazine or newspaper and they would have a rate card and you would know what you would pay.
Well, they don't have a rate card. They sort of calculate the rates on the fly based on, how many hits they claim to be getting. Anyway, Zane, I'm going to have to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we will be back with more economic news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I heard your comment about a Soviet Union-style collapse, and, I was been thinking the same thing, but I'm starting to look at it a little bit differently. I'm looking at it from a Soviet-style revolution. In other words, you take the Bolsheviks and you see the pictures of Marx, Lenin, and Trotsky. I'm starting to see Abrams, Bolton, and Kushner, and I'm starting to look at Venezuela and Iraq as Czechoslovakia and Romania.
Yes.
And from that standpoint, it's not very promising on our future. Instead of, these three people I mentioned, Abrams, Bolton, and Kushner, are already in, they don't have to take anybody to the basement and shoot them. They're already there. They just have to pull a little coup in the government. And, the Soviets couldn't hang on. The Bolsheviks couldn't hang on to Russia. That's why they're bad guys over there. But they got an inroad to this country now. So I just wanted to get your take on my view.
Well, there's no question that a lot of the Democrats are, avowed socialists, and socialism was, of course, the foundation for communism. And we're seeing the country as a whole, the government as a whole, just drowning us all in more and more regulation, which was also a hallmark of the former Soviet Union. I don't want to see a communist/Soviet revolution in this country. I want us to go back to being a constitutional republic with a limited government. But I'm looking at all this infighting and this factionalism, and to me, it does look like we're heading for a collapse, and it could be triggered by the economy. We're overextended in all these, the military, and I do really think that this country doesn't have far to go, or this government doesn't have far to go. This country will be just fine.
Well, I think so, but you look at, if they get a hold of Venezuela, they could keep it going here. And just look at all the transition between freedom and what we can say and what we can't say, and all the spying on us. It kind of reminds me of the early Soviets, when they took over Russia.
I'm not seeing it quite the same way that you are. And, who knows what the future is going to bring? As Yoda said, always in motion is the future. Little short guy, funny ears. And what we could see is some kind of a totalitarian regime arise out of the ruins of a collapsed federal government, and that's something we all have to be on guard against.
Right, because after the Bolsheviks took over in the Soviet Union, their economy was just about broken as well.
Oh, they were in terrible shape over there, and that was continuing from under the reign of Tsar Nicholas II. Anyway, Terry, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. We will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economic news here. And the U.S. trade deficit is continuing to surge despite Trump's policies. And it's described as a stunning failure, and it really is. Now, Trump promised to cut U.S. dependence on imports, and he tried to do that with the tariffs. But when he first did that, I said, the problem is American agriculture and industry is not positioned to step into that market void. And that seems to be exactly what's happened. So Americans are still buying from China. They're paying those tariffs. It's a huge amount of money. It's putting more pressure on the American people. But the U.S. trade deficit reached a 10-year high of $621 billion last year. So, not good. All right, we have a caller on the line. Patrick in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I enjoy the show, but I would just like to get something straightened out here. You seem to be talking doublespeak when it comes to Donald Trump. You talk about the negativity, like your disappointment about Donald Trump, and then a few minutes ago, you were talking about Kushner and all that stuff, and then you seemed kind of disappointed that the Democrats are going after Trump. What do you think balance three branches of government has to do with? It has to do with balancing the power. It's not about they're picking on Donald Trump with this. He's a crook. I mean, there's nothing to deny about that.
Well, Patrick, I don't know that for a fact here.
Most of the stuff.
Patrick, I don't know that he's a crook. I know he's a disappointment. I know that he's a very weak leader. Now, Patrick, it's obvious you weren't listening to the early part of the program because I explained I don't invest in individual politicians or candidates. I'm here to basically try and restore the correct process, get us back to being a constitutional republic. Now, it's one thing if Trump actually has committed an impeachable offense, then by all means go ahead. But so far, all we've seen for the last 2 years from the Democrats is endless thrashing about just trying to find something. And I think that's an abuse of their authority. And we've seen them violating the separation of powers multiple times over. So it is a real huge mess. Anyway, Patrick, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go.
Did you hear about the deal he made in China last year?
Okay, Patrick, we're going to let you go, and we're going to switch over to Jim in New York. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi, Mike. I'd like your caller, not Patrick, but the previous caller. He was saying that, Bolshevism, communism could come under Kushner, Pence, and Bolton. Everyone assumes it'll be under Democrats, but if you remember George Bush Jr., some people called his, his foreign policy a Trotskyite foreign policy. So I think that caller made some excellent points.
He made some very excellent points here. I just am not sure I agree with his final analysis. What I would like to see happen, and maybe this is biasing my opinion, again, using the present Russian Republic as an example, after the Soviet Union collapsed, they had to get through some months of hardship, and they put together a new Russian Republic, which is not communist, it's not socialist, and things are much better in Russia today than they were under the Soviet Union, and I'm hoping that's what's going to happen here.
Oh, yes, definitely. I wouldn't underestimate President Trump's chances to win in 2020. I think if you look at the field of Democrats, it looks pretty pathetic. Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren. I mean, I think Trump could win. And, I've always had this suspicion that Israel wanted Trump.
Well, there's no question that Trump is pro-Israel. I mean, he came out with that response to the Ilhan Omar situation, saying that he just couldn't believe that Congress had failed to pass an anti-Semitism resolution. So Trump is definitely Israel's man. But you know something? So was Hillary. And she was getting a lot of support from Israel and Jewish donors back in 2016. She may still step back in. I think we all remember that really kind of, that weird situation where she said on TV, I'm not running in 2020. And then 24 hours later, she's saying, really, you shouldn't take me seriously about that sort of thing. She's waiting for the Mueller report to come on out. If she does step back in to run in 2020, she will be formidable because she still has her political machine around her. She's got huge amounts of money and supporters. And she's going to campaign on, it's my turn, I deserved it, it's time that we have a woman. As you say, the rest of the field of potential Democrats right now is looking pretty thin, but it's a long time until 2020. We haven't even begun to see the shakeouts of people stepping down from running. They've just made their announcements. And I think it's a long way to 2020, and pretty much anything could happen.
Yes. I had a thought. Whenever the media obsesses over Russian interference in the election, do you ever think that it's Israel interference in our election and they're afraid to say it?
Well, of course they're afraid to say it. Again, look at the reaction to Ilhan Omar's comment about members of the United States Congress accepting all this money from an organization that clearly serves the interests of a foreign government. And by the way, for those of you who are paying attention, AIPAC has never been required to register as an agent of a foreign government, even though that's exactly what they are.
Yes. That Omar, I have to say, I hope she sticks to her guns. Kind of sad you have 500 mostly, quote, Christian representatives, and none dare mention AIPAC. And as they say, the truth shall set you free. And it took a Muslim woman
Yes.
to bring up the truth. It's pretty pathetic.
It is. Now, as far as the makeup of Congress, there are a lot of Jewish members of Congress, by the way. It's not just Christians and one Muslim. It's a little more complex than that.
It's I would say at least 70% so-called Christian representatives.
I think that's
all I
right.
wanted to say. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about the economic news here. And over in Ohio, General Motors has closed their plant near Youngstown. And that factory has been there for 50 years producing cars and other vehicles during wartime. And this is going to eliminate 1,700 hourly positions by the end of this month. And GM announced late last year that Lordstown, along with 3 plants in the U.S. and 1 in Canada, would close by early next year. And apparently these factories were tooled up to make the Cruze, spelled C-R-U-Z-E. It's a popular, well-reviewed compact car. It was made in Lordstown since 2011. And they're saying it's become a victim of consumer tastes as car buyers in an era of inexpensive gasoline have shown a strong preference for trucks, SUVs, and crossover-type vehicles, all of which produce far bigger profits than sedans for General Motors. Well, I'm not sure about that. First of all, when war comes, the price of gasoline is going to go right through the roof. And yes, it's consumer demand, and it's keeping up with the Joneses. And Claire and I have noticed that here in Hawaii. Now, because we're islands and everything is crowded and tight, the road lanes, the highway lanes, the parking spaces, they're striped very, very narrow. We're driving this little tiny compact car, and I'm still having to sort of aim carefully to make sure I'm inside the lines on both sides. And usually on either side of us, there'll be these giant pickup trucks. They're all shiny and chrome and stickers on the back. And you look in the load bed and you can see they're still showroom new. They're not being used as pickup trucks. It's just somebody said, I want to drive a pickup truck. And that's what I'm going to do here. The other part of it, of course, is people aren't buying new cars the way they did. They're hanging on to their old cars. There's a lot of talk over in the right to repair movement about including cars in their agenda. So far, it's been computers, TVs, household appliances. But yeah, when I was a kid, cars were built so that their owners could do minor repairs on them. I remember rebuilding entire engines. I didn't like it, but I did it. Today, you can't. You've got to have that little tiny computer that plugs in that will tell you what the car is thinking. Anyway, another story coming on out about the retail apocalypse. It is getting worse, and a lot of stores are on death watch. This is coming out of money.com, and just in a single 24-hour period last week, Gap, JCPenney and Victoria's Secret announced they would be closing more than 300 stores combined. And these announced closings came soon after retail companies made the difficult decisions to shut down all Payless Shoe Source and Gymboree stores throughout the U.S. And of course, it's in the middle of Sears' attempt to survive. Now, Sears closed out last year by filing for bankruptcy and closing roughly 140 Sears and Kmart stores. And we have iconic brands are disappearing from our economic landscape, like Toys R Us and Bon-Ton. Anyway, Family Dollar is going to close nearly 400 of their stores, actually 390. This is a chain that courts low-income shoppers with an array of items sold for under $10 at its more than 8,000 stores. It's owned by Dollar Tree, which operates a chain of 7,000 other stores in suburban areas. And Dollar Tree stores cater to customers who make more than Family Dollar stores do, but all of their products sell for only $1. And those stores can sometimes be fun, because sometimes they have some really cool things to try and lure people in. And what the heck, it's only $1. But Dollar Tree bought Family Dollar in 2015 for $8.5 billion, and the combined company hoped that by joining forces, it could grow its customer base, reduce costs, and fend off the bigger retailers like Dollar General and Walmart. Now, Walmart is definitely not a dollar store. Charlotte Russe is going to liquidate and close all of their stores. They filed for bankruptcy protection a month ago, and at that time they announced plans to close only 94 of its 512 stores. But apparently, liquidator SB360 Capital Partners won the auction at bankruptcy court for Charlotte Russe's $160 million worth of inventory and other assets. And apparently the plan to shut it all down was approved by the bankruptcy court in Delaware just yesterday. So, another story, this one out of Zero Hedge. The U.S. economy is teetering on the brink of a new recession. That's just the hard reality. The indicators are all there. And U.S. debt levels are exploding. I mean, we can all see the U.S. economy has dramatically slowed down. You can see it with all the empty storefronts. And people are in debt. They're trying to get through the hard times with their credit cards. Right now, there are 37 million credit card accounts in the U.S. that are seriously delinquent right now. And you should be doing the best that you can do to get out of any debt that you have. Just forego the vacations, forego eating out, just slap as much as you can on those credit card bills and that car loan and that mortgage, and just get your debt down, because it's going to get very ugly out there. And apparently, construction spending is now skidding. Non-residential construction stagnates. So bad news over in the construction sector. The news is really all bad. There's nothing coming. Unless you're working for a defense contractor, and then times are very, very good. Australia has fallen into recession. Nigeria is slipping the way of Venezuela. And speaking of Venezuela, they've had a little bit of an embarrassment. Their state-owned oil company, PDVSA, has declared a maritime emergency after a German company operating a portion of its tanker fleet said it needed to return 10 vessels because of unpaid fees. And this is bad timing because, according to Reuters, PDVSA needs as many as 160 people, including tanker captains, machinists, and operators, to bring the ships back that Germany Bernhard Schultz Ship Management is returning. But PDVSA does not have those crews. And unfortunately, PDVSA, They're sinking into debt. Last month, the German company said it would abandon 2 of the Venezuelan company's oil tankers in Portugal. Okay. Article out of Investment Watch blog. I remember Seattle. Claire and I lived there for a while. We didn't actually live in Seattle. We actually lived out in the Cascade Mountains in a little town called North Bend. If you remember the TV series Twin Peaks, it was filmed there. There was a big tourism economy built around it, even though the show had gone off the air. But apparently, the homeless problem has gotten so bad in Seattle that people are saying the community is just falling apart. And that's another indicator things are not good in this country. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. And that caller who was saying there might be a socialist revolution in this country, that would certainly be an argument for it. To redistribute the wealth. Unfortunately, most of that wealth is in, assets, large mansions, factories, things that can't be carved up and shared with ordinary Americans. So it is a mess. Bad times are coming. Getting on down to the borders, officials are saying that the Border Patrol is now strained to the breaking point. There are record-breaking numbers of large groups of people illegally crossing that southern border. And at a press conference in Washington last Tuesday, Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Kevin K. McAleenan, said it's time for lawmakers to address the growing crisis. It is just not sustainable. The system is well beyond capacity and remains at the breaking point. Officials revealed that 76,000 migrants crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally just last month, more than double the number from the same period last year. And they're being lured here with the promise of free stuff from the Democrats. That's what the Democrats are going to be campaigning on in 2020. Vote for us. We'll take stuff away from the people who've been in this country for a very long time, and we'll give it to you to show how much we care about you and how much we love you. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And so far, the U.S. government, meaning the U.S. taxpayers, have spent $98 million on health care for the illegals, along with 57,000 man-hours spent at hospitals. And those are just the numbers from the Customs and Border Patrol. So it's time to build that wall. Now, apparently one of those costs are about to go up here because the Department of Homeland Security secretary has revealed that every migrant girl over the age of 10 gets a pregnancy test because apparently there is so much rape going on at the southern U.S. border. This is coming from Kirsten Nielsen. And she's talking about, the increase in violence at ICE. And she's saying it's not a safe journey. Well, it really isn't. But whose fault is that? It's the fault of the parents. Now, most Democrats are still in lockstep supporting unfettered, borderless immigration. But surprisingly, some are beginning to take a different view. California Senator Dianne Feinstein is now saying the reducing of the flow of undocumented migrants is a necessity for a variety of reasons, including budgetary considerations and lower crime rates here. And she's absolutely right. And Feinstein is making the exact same points Trump is making, except how Trump is wrong for doing so because he's morally bankrupt and he's bigoted here. But Feinstein said people who should be here are those who come legally. We've got to enforce our borders. The day when America can be a welfare system for Mexico is gone. Well, yes, absolutely, she's right about that. The other problem we have to deal with is that apparently MS-13 is just pouring into this country. Now, MS-13 actually did begin in the United States. Claire and I watched a documentary about them the other day, and they are extremely violent. They make the Yakuza look like choir boys. And they're into sex trafficking, child prostitution, murder, rape, armed robbery, drug trafficking, human trafficking, extortion, money laundering, prostitution, assault, kidnapping, arms trafficking. And these MS-13 gang members are coming up from El Salvador. And the gang was formed in Los Angeles in the late 70s by El Salvadorians fleeing their own country's civil war. Now, today there are an estimated 30,000 to 50,000 MS-13 gang members, having spread from Los Angeles into nearly every state in the U.S. and throughout Central and South America. And the horrific violence waged by MS-13 in El Salvador has become so bad that El Salvadorian police officers are fleeing their own country to seek asylum in the United States because they're afraid for their lives and the lives of their families. I mean, the MS-13, they're really out there. They don't come any worse than MS-13. Okay, Texas health officials report that nearly 200 people have contracted mumps in migrant detention facilities located across the state so far this fiscal year. And apparently, the Texas Department of State Health Services states that 186 people in migrant detention centers had confirmed cases of mumps. Now, they're saying the state health agency doesn't know what the vaccination status is of migrant adults and children who enter. However, all unaccompanied minors are vaccinated when they're detained. Okay, this gets us back to something else we've talked about on the show. Are the vaccines really protecting people, or are they in fact causing the diseases? And earlier this week we had this story showing that a lot of people who got the measles vaccine seem to come down with measles. And it turns out basically it's a reaction to the vaccine itself. Now, the good news is, this is coming out of Daily Caller, Trump has secured funding for more than half of his proposed border wall. And this will be approximately 445 miles of the total 722 miles desired by the Trump administration. I think he needs to go back to that other company who said they could build a much longer wall for a lot less money. So I don't know how the bidding worked out on that one. And now Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez claims the entire premise of a border wall is based on racism and bigotry. Well, could we apply that to Israel, which has a wall? We could apply it to the Vatican. They've got a really solid wall. I got to see that one up close. Lots of countries have border walls. Mexico has a border wall on their southern border. But the Democrats are still out there. They are desperate for illegal immigrant voters to shift the 2020 elections. And Trump and the GOP aren't doing anything about it. We need a national voter ID law right now. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And the U.S. House of Representatives finally passed the anti-hate resolution. And apparently Nancy Pelosi's tactic of bringing other minority groups into it, like the Muslims, did the trick, because the resolution passed with a vote of 407 to 23. Now, where this is breaking down, of course, is the fact that Representative Ilhan Omar was not expressing hate for Jews or Muslims or anybody else. She was stating an unequivocal fact that members of the U.S. Congress accept money from an organization that is serving a foreign government. That's what she basically said. And of course, Israel's agenda is to say, criticizing Israel, that's anti-Semitism. Because if you didn't hate the Jewish people, you wouldn't care what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. That's where they're coming from. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Don in the Philippines. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I was going to say something about Hillary, but before that, I just want to tell you, you opened my eyes a lot about the whole Israel situation, because very few people on the internets say anything about Israel. They leave it alone for one reason or another. But and this lady, however you pronounce her name, the little Somali lady, I like her. And, she's nice. I mean, she's telling the truth. But
That's why they hate her.
Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I want to say something about Hillary. She's kind of flip-flopping whether she's running or not. I think it's going to be like a stealth candidacy is what it'll be. I think it might already be planned that way because they have so many candidates in the Democratic field that nobody's gonna jump out in the lead. So when they get to the convention, they'll have like 6 different candidates, and then they'll say, "Oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? I guess we'll just have to call on Hillary Clinton, the old standby." I think that's what they're trying to engineer it that way so she'll get it.
Well, I think Hillary already has set the machinery in motion for a run for 2020. Hillary2020.org, I think it is, has already been reserved as a domain name. And I think she's just trying to keep it under wraps while she sort of dips her toe in the water to see what's going on. But when she retracted her statement saying she wasn't going to run in 2020, she made the point of saying she was going to wait to see what the Robert Mueller report contained. And I think what she is hoping for is that there's going to be something in there that is going to really stick to Donald Trump and help to bring him down, at which point the GOP doesn't really have much of anybody else to run other than Mike Pence. And he's going to come into 2020, looking like a warmonger, and we're sick and tired of war. I think there's a good chance Hillary is going to run because she can't let go of 2016. It seems like every few days there's another article out where Hillary is saying, "Oh, I lost because of," and she spins that giant wheel. Today's excuse is, young people, and
a lot easier for her not to run and just wait. Like that's what happened last time with what's his name, Mitt Romney. He got a hotel room in Cleveland where they had the convention. He was just waiting for the popular acclaim to say, Mitt, we need Mitt or something like that. It didn't happen because Trump was too strong of a candidate. But it'd be a lot easier for her not to run at all and just wait it out and then just jump in at the last minute. But you're probably right. She might run. Dick Morris said the only way she's not going to run for president is if she's dead. That's what he said.
Well, Dick Morris may unfortunately be right, but it was still very bizarre of her to make that statement that she wasn't running and then retract it 24 hours later, which raises the question if Hillary is suffering age-related mental deterioration, because we were seeing symptoms of it back in 2016.
Yeah, she didn't have it really all together, I don't think. I'll let you go, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Phone lines are now open here. Getting on back to immigration. Basically, there are a lot of reasons to have a border wall. There are a lot of reasons to control who is allowed to come into this country or not. And the Democrats basically just stick to the same basic claim. If you're in favor of border control, you're morally bankrupt and you're a bigot, you're a racist. Because that's all they've got to go with. Because so far, everybody who's had direct experience with this flood of immigrants pouring across the border, they're seeing it as a negative. They're seeing it as a threat to this country. And I'm sort of amazed that Trump backed off, trying to get the military to pay for this. But then you had the leadership of the Pentagon saying, no, we want to save this money for other things, which technically they're not allowed to do. This is a time of war, and that makes the president the commander-in-chief. But Trump, unfortunately, is proving to be a very, very weak leader. And that's illustrated by the story we did earlier in the week about how John Bolton is basically running U.S. foreign policy right now. Over in Germany, as migrants poured across their border, the Migration and Refugee Services referred 5,000 cases of crimes under international law to the police and the Attorney General. But in the end, only 129 cases ended up being investigated. All those others were just allowed on in. Okay. Now, Hungary's Viktor Orban could face expulsion from the European Parliament's center-right European People's Party political group. The EPP is set to discuss Orban and his Fidesz party on the 20th of this month. The EPP is the parliament's largest group, but has been wrangling over Orban's increasingly populist and anti-European Union rhetoric. And in a response, Orban called those seeking his party's ouster from the group useful idiots, saying in an interview that their efforts would only serve the interests of the left. He's certainly correct about that one here. Over in Sweden, there's a video that was made by the police in the no-go zone of Rinkeby-Järva. It's been viewed over 2 million times just in the past few days. And it's basically the reason they made the video and saying it's gone too far is because of an incident where 2 boys in the multicultural zone were trying to shoplift pastries at a grocery store, and when they got caught, they pulled out guns. Anyway, a little bit of good news here. Apparently, the California Department of Motor Vehicles is to be audited for voter fraud. And this time, the audit will focus on the DMV program that registers drivers to vote. And the department has admitted mishandling voter registration information for 23,000 drivers and double registering as many as 77,000 others, which means 77,000 registrations that can be used to commit election fraud. Now, State Assemblyman Jim Patterson claims over 500 Californians may not have been able to vote last November because the DMV did not send their information to the Secretary of State's office in time. And he said the problems with Motor Voter have risen to such a degree that there is a bipartisan effort in this. The errors include registering 16-year-olds to vote. We have numbers of people who had their registration changed without their approval or knowledge. Now, to me, that shows intent to deceive. Okay. About a week ago, there was this situation on the UC Berkeley campus where there was this conservative group there trying to recruit more conservatives. And this man just walked on up and said, "You're promoting violence," and punched a guy in the face. And it was caught on video. Now, Zachary Greenberg has been arrested. He's now banned from the campus. There were people there saying that he really wasn't a student there anyway. And even though there is a video of him committing the assault, he's pleading not guilty. He's been charged with 3 felony counts. So that's going to be great jury duty. You're going to be in and out by lunch. Over in Baltimore, a former police department sergeant has been indicted for allegedly planting a pellet gun on a suspect who was deliberately run over by a fellow sergeant in 2014. The second sergeant was the leader of a now defunct corrupt elite task force within the department, was later convicted of several crimes. It does sometimes feel like the whole world is just going crazy. What was that old line? They're all crazy except me and you, and I've got my doubts about you. Getting into the world of computers, this is an interesting story. Over in Kyoto, Japan, they have this 400-year-old Kodaiji temple, and they've got a modern makeover. They have installed the world's first sutra-chanting android, modeled after Kannon, the Buddhist goddess of mercy, and it was introduced to the public last week. Now, Kannon is worshipped by thousands of temples in Japan as a deity who helps people in distress, and now the country's fascination with robotics has made its way into that worship. So it's an interesting blend of, ancient religion and modern technology. And apparently, the goal of this android is to spread the word of Buddhism to a younger generation in contemporary language, make it a little bit easier to understand. On the downside of computers, apparently last year there were 12,449 data breaches. That's a 424% increase over the previous year. And apparently 47% of all compromised identity records having been exposed in breaches experienced by organizations from the United States and China. And still nothing is being done about it. Now, I understand that the email system is going through a transformation to try and block spoofed emails and other malware. And unfortunately, we're on Spectrum email. And lately, a lot of stuff is just not getting through. I think the email system is broken and nobody wants to talk about it. Over at Paul Craig Roberts' website, there was a quick little blurb. He has this newsletter he sends out. And apparently about half the people on his mailing list are no longer getting them. And he was wondering if it was censorship. And I think it's a tech issue. If they were going to censor them, they would block them all. Now, technology against technology is not the correct way of dealing with cybercrime and hackers, because it turns it into a game. My hackers are better than your hackers, nya, nya, nya. I was astounded to find out there is no law against writing malware. That's a stunner right there. There should be. You know, where's the NSA? If anybody can track down the hackers, it should be the NSA. They haven't been able to find one. But I think they ought to find one or two and just make an example of them. Because we're all being victimized. We're all prey. And apparently there is a new attack against Wi-Fi routers. It's called the crack attack, spelled with a K. And apparently it exploits a fundamental flaw in the system itself, and no amount of password changing can protect you. Now, fortunately, this type of hacking can only be done by somebody within close range of the router itself. It can't be done over the outside internet, the wide area network. And that means that routers in private homes are much less vulnerable. But if you use public networks at coffee shops and restaurants, you are very vulnerable to this attack. If you must use a public network, check for the little gold padlock on your browser that shows the network is secure. Now, certain websites like banking and online shopping sites use more secure technology. Tech companies like Google and Apple have either already released updates to address the issue or have promised to do so. Such updates will make your network far more secure. And techies are also encouraging internet users to patch or update their routers. But again, just turning it into a game between the hackers, the black hat hackers and the white hat hackers, it's a game. And that's not going to make the problem go away, especially with all the profitability that's out there. Okay, Windows 10, everybody's not so favorite operating system. Apparently the KB 4482887 cumulative update is causing major stuttering in games. Apparently it sort of hosed the graphics system, and it's basically degraded graphics performance. Frame per second has dropped, and people are reporting a severe mouse input lag, meaning you'll move the mouse and there'll be a noticeable amount of time before the game reacts. Now that makes for lousy gameplay, I presume. I don't play computer games other than flight simulators. But I know that if that simulator doesn't react instantly to the mouse or the joystick, it's an issue. Over in New York City, homicides are up 37% in 2019. And apparently a lot of it was just last month. So some of the neighborhoods in New York City are being turned into war zones. No indication as to, well, apparently they don't know who's committing the homicides and whether it's linked to the immigration issue. This one made me very sick because, as you know, I love dogs. I love dogs. Out in California, there was a homeowner, Alfonso Galindo, And he installed security cameras on the outside of his San Diego home because he was baffled by strange stain patterns that kept emerging on the ground of his front yard for months. Keep that in mind, for months. What the security camera footage showed was that the mailman, every time he went by, the mailman would spray pepper spray at this 7-year-old rescue dog, Poopa. And the video, it is shocking, showing the dog just trying to deal with that. Now, here in Hawaii, if you use pepper spray, you have to justify why you did it to the police. If you cannot, you can go to jail for assault. Now, I don't know if whooping on a puppy qualifies as assault, but I would like to see that postman identified and talked to. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. And speaking of Hawaii, our Senate, which is highly liberal, has now sent a petition to the U.S. Congress to modify or possibly even repeal the Second Amendment. And again, we know that the Democrats, the liberals, they want everyone's guns taken away. Well, not everyone. They want to disarm the law-abiding citizens who would turn in their guns in the event of a ban or confiscation. The criminals are still going to have the guns. History has shown that over and over again. Okay, yesterday we talked about Scott Gottlieb resigning from the FDA, supposedly to spend more time with his family. And I made the comment that usually spend more time with the family means something else is going on behind the scenes. And what's interesting is 2 months ago, Gottlieb tweeted that he would not be resigning from the FDA. That he had big plans. Now, apparently it turns out he's the only FDA commissioner to ever work for Big Pharma prior to being nominated, and he holds investments in 20 different healthcare companies that manufacture products that he and the FDA were responsible for regulating. In other words, a massive conflict of interest, and I guess he just decided he wanted to keep his investments, and he's stepping down as head of the FDA. No replacement has been named yet here. Story out of, well, this is actually CNN. Even with measles outbreaks across the U.S., at least 20 states have proposed anti-vaccination bills. Now, this headline is a little misleading. These bills are not blocking vaccination. They're saying people should have a choice. State after state, legislators are introducing bills that make it easier for people to opt out of vaccinations, which I think that's just common sense. If we have any intrinsic rights, it's a right to our own body, what we eat, what we drink, what medicines we take, what things we avoid. Rand Paul is out there saying that we shouldn't trade our freedom for a false sense of security. And this is a comment he made about forced vaccinations. Over at Facebook, they're now being pressured to block vaccination resistors. So social media is totally co-opted. They're censoring. If you are on Facebook and you put anything up that is asking questions about vaccines, you're in trouble. Facebook will shut you down here. And again, well over half the people who come down with measles are people who've been vaccinated. Now, interestingly enough, there's this Harvard immunologist, and when she went to get a passport to travel, she had to bring her vaccination record, and noticed she'd been vaccinated against the measles twice as a child. And that was puzzling to her because she had gotten the measles after the vaccines. I'm going to come back to this story tomorrow. Right now, the music is here, and I've got to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please share what you learn here with all of your friends. Talk to them. Bring back the art of the conversation. And please donate to Republic Broadcasting. They really need all the help that you can send them. I'm being serious about this. So we'll be back tomorrow, and aloha, America.
Oahu.